Welcome to Exception Handlers, the podcast where CTOs debug the challenges that keep us up at night. I'm Alex.
And I'm Bill, and we're here to dive deep into the runtime errors facing technology leaders today. Those real-world problems that only surface when our systems meet the complexity of actual operations.
This podcast is brought to you by the LA CTO Forum, a professional organization of technology executives in Southern California and beyond. The forum organizes regular events on topics CTOs care about. One of these events was a recent panel discussion on product management and AI, which was co-hosted by the LA CTO Forum and PMLA. This discussion covered a number of topics, including why AI projects fail, how the role of product managers is evolving, the impact AI has on customer experience, team dynamics, and of course, software development with AI. So the first topic was discussion about why AI projects fail and how to make them succeed. And this whole thing is predicated on a study that MIT released recently, which shows that 95% of all projects in large organizations that are attempting to do AI stuff are failing. And the big question here is why? Why is there such a high degree of failure with these AI projects?
Well, and clearly, I think that this is probably an indicator of the earliest days of introducing AI into the organizations. And my gut feel, and I think we'll dive down into this as they did through here in the conversation, is that the expectations weren't exactly in line with the realities of what to do. And it was also, to be frank, new tech for everybody on many levels.
Yeah, I think the theme that came up in this part of the discussion was, first of all, AI doesn't magically solve problems that might have already existed in your organization. So if you aren't great at understanding user requirements or workflows or what have you, and that's the reason a regular project fails, AI projects will fail for similar reasons, because AI is not a magic box, just makes your issues go away. It just gets you to a failure point faster, probably, because you could speed run your whole product lifecycle. Yeah,
well, gosh, and it looks so good on the outside of the package.
Very, very true. And related to this, the one of the quotes that was said that I thought was really good is many teams skip strategy and jump right to execution and don't really bother to ask, why is this a good idea for AI?
Well, and I also think to that point, I believe the way it was originally sold, or maybe not sold, but at least absorbed by upper management, is in a way that almost encouraged that. It encouraged, like, okay, we have all these big, long, lengthy processes where people say it takes time, et cetera, and that's all going away. We're just going to be able to say, rub the lamp and ask the genie.
Yeah, and definitely that. And then also, I think the other thing that's related to this that came up was, AI isn't necessarily the best answer to every problem, and even if it is, the way you use it really matters. So somebody was like, if there's a project that just shoves a chat interface into some existing tool without giving too much thought to, is this the right user experience to have here? Or should we have some more guardrails around how you talk to AI? I mean, even stuff like this, it's a little bit more pedestrian of a reason to fail, but it is unique to the AI experience, right? Because like AI is a hammer, and that hammer looks like a chat box. And if you could just smash every problem with that hammer, you're not going to necessarily get great results in every case.
Right. And the other key element there, I think, as we're all learning, is it's a hammer with a very limited memory. So unlike the person who's sitting next to you who has been talking to clients for the last 15 years or 2 years or 6 months and knows things inherently about the system or the context of what's working, the AI knows exactly what you told it within the last 30 minutes or had something written down that it can read. And it loses the larger macro context, I think, pretty easily in many cases.
Yeah, that's a great point. Somebody made the comment that because AI makes it so easy to start building stuff, people kind of tend to skip over the boring, painful bits of customer discovery and just go right to build. And that inevitably isn't going to lead to a good place, whether you're using AI or not. And so one person said that, they did the painful stuff first. They actually sat there, listened to a whole bunch of sessions and figured out what the people were talking about, and then gave all that to Claude to generate requirements, which is an essential step in getting the right answer, the right product built, and then gave that to Claude to actually code, which resulted in a good product at the end, because it was all predicated on what did the customer actually ask for, what needs did they actually vocalize, and that was all captured initially. So that's a really important part of this.
Well, and to build on that, the thing that they did, which we're all starting to learn now, is that you don't just go to the AI and ask for the answer. Sometimes you ask the AI to help you ask the AI about something, and then maybe even later to validate that the AI did something in the way that it was supposed to. And I do that all the time, and I think that's a great point right here, where you don't throw away the process itself. You actually use AI to leverage the process.
Absolutely. And I think this actually comes up in later discussions, but this is a excellent point. So just to wrap up this section, I think after all said and done about why are all these projects failing, the bottom line, it seems like, although AI changed some aspects of how we do things, you could do more stuff and you could do stuff faster, it hasn't changed a lot of the fundamentals. You still have to understand what your users need, what the user experience should be. You still need to get everybody in the organization sort of lined up against that same thing. And if you skip any of those steps, any project, AI otherwise, will fail. And there's nothing magical about AI that suddenly solves that.
Agree 100%. And I think that really brings us into the second topic, which is the kind of transforming role of product managers and engineers. Clearly, people are seeing that there's a blurring. There are those who believe that product managers are simply going to tell AI what to do, and boom, our software is going to come out on the other side, all the way to the other side of the equation where engineers are going to be empowered to do things based upon more abstract discussions on the software itself.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because there's no question, and you could tell that everybody's on the same page on this one. Something is changing. The role is clearly shifting and evolving. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, what is it evolving towards? What is ultimately going to be the product manager role in the future? It's unclear at this point, I would say.
Yeah. And I mean, you could see it in the room when they're having the conversations. A lot of the product manager questions were really revolving around, some of the tooling, some of the other things, which would traditionally be in the land of the engineer. Although you have seen, recent UX type tooling coming up and helping provide more, clickable demonstrations of things and examples. And I think that this, in some ways, is a logical next step in that.
Yeah. There was actually, to that point, there was a lot of conversations around how much should product managers embrace the vibe coding tools to really kind of nail down their thoughts, if you will, before they take it down to engineering. And so somebody was saying that, like, and she was a product leader, as a matter of course, every product manager should build and launch a full UI native app themselves, just to go through that whole cycle to understand what it takes, to gain some empathy for the engineering side of the world, and to really kind of refine and nail down their thoughts around what this thing should be doing. And that actually makes them better product managers, even if all that stuff that they just went through is throwaway.
Yeah. And I think that it also helps build the appreciation of this kind of traditionally magic black box, the back end. When they build these things and, oh, look, it clicks and it does, but I need to save it and it needs to do this and this data needs to change. And where does that happen? It's very powerful. I see it overall as a positive, just because of that very fact that it is introducing product managers more into the development side. I know that there's engineers that feel a little bit threatened by this, and there will be, I think, some skirmishes going forward as various companies, which I believe will handle these things differently, will kind of work this transition between the two. And it could be that it's not horizontal, it's vertical. In other words, on this particular project, engineering is reaching more out into the UI, and on this particular project, product is reaching more into the quote unquote back end.
Yeah. Actually, it was somebody, I think, one of the questions that was asked about this guy was relaying an anecdote where his product team just banged out a beautiful looking vibe coded prototype, showed it to senior management, and then senior management said, "This is amazing. Engineering, how many days before this is reality?" And engineering came back with, "This is weeks, if not months of work." And inevitably a conversation ensues as to how is that even possible? I can see this thing in front of my eyes and it's clickable and it's workable. How is it Wix? And, the engineering manager was like, well, there's authentication, there's persistence, there's all kinds of validations, there's deployment, there's infrastructure complications, right? Like none of these things are even thought of when you're just vibe coding a UI thing, but is important. And so I think to that point, if you have a PM who at least has to kind of become aware of all these things, so the unknown disappears, then maybe it's just an easier discussion to have with engineering to say, yes, I get that I don't know how to do it, but I understand that there's all this other stuff that needs to occur before this is production ready.
Right. And on some levels become an advocate on the side of that level of work that has to happen. Because the other thing, and to me, I always come to this and I'm going to have to mention it now, is QA in the AI world is insane. You have things that are unbounded and non-deterministic, generating things that are supposed to be bounded and deterministic. And, buyer beware, I guess. And I think this merging will come in handy there too, because I actually believe that you're going to see product management become more aware and aligned with what's going on in the QA side.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as far as blurring lines and roles, I could envision a real blurring occurring between traditional QA and product management, especially if you can enlist the help of AI to help create some of the test cases and manage the test suite. I could see there kind of being a singular thing that emerges in that the PM doesn't have to go to QA necessarily to stand up a test suite and run it and validate it.
Or think about the scenario where a product manager starts building virtual users.
Yeah,
has them go in there, and they can have someone from the expert to the dunce to the the wobbler, whatever it is. They could go ahead and envision these things, get them to the point where they actually go through and bang on the system in a way that may not be envisioned by others.
Yeah, absolutely, and more scalable, right? They could do more stuff if you have Playwright running queries against your UI. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think overall, the takeaway on this is, I think be open-minded about it, realistically. If whatever angle you're coming from, there is going to be some thrash going on. There's going to be some really cool things that come out, and there's going to be some challenges. But at the end of the day, if you're thinking about, we've got to get the software across the line, and our job is to get out quality code and manage resources appropriately, then that's kind of the take-home I had.
I think there's one other thing that came up that I just want to highlight because I think it was interesting. And this was the idea that AI aside, there is macro environment changes that are also impacting the PM role. A lot of it has to do with, somebody said that up until 2023, growth was king, financing was easy and cheap to get, and therefore that was the thing that drove all kinds of activities. And now profits are king, financing is harder to get, and therefore it's actually forcing product managers to change what they think about, because if you're optimizing for growth, a little bit different than if you're optimizing for profits. So that was one kind of macro force that was highlighted. And the other one was this idea that SaaS is moving from user opinionated self-service tools to just do it for me tools. So, the idea of kind of a classical SaaS thing is, here's some data, I'm going to translate that into information, to here's some data, I'm going to translate that into answers. And again, this isn't necessarily AI related, but it is another meta trend that is impacting product management and what they're trying to figure out and what questions they're trying to answer. You put AI on top of that, and it is a very complex, very rapidly evolving, and quite blurry kind of environment to be in for a product manager.
And one that I think can easily be misinterpreted by upper management as to the efficacy of solving.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the bottom line to all this, as you just pointed out, the job's changing clearly and the skill sets are evolving. But really, if you kind of step back, the basic requirement for a person to be able to translate customer needs into some sort of an actionable, executable plan, that doesn't change. How you go about doing that changes, what tooling you use changes, how you interface with others may change or evolve, but that need doesn't go away. That need doesn't really change. So that still is going to drive the PM role.
Absolutely.
All right. So that was topic on product manager roles. There's the next topic was around customer experience and personalization as sort of powered by AI. And this was a really wide-ranging conversation, I would say, about all the various things that are going on in this space. So one of the panelists was somebody from Carvana, and so he had a lot of specific Carvana examples around this topic. So, for example, they had this idea of they had an AI chat-powered interface where they got really good results by getting the AI to ask clarifying questions back to the user before it tries to give them an immediate like answer to their query. And so if somebody's talking about, I want to know about this car, instead of immediately spewing out all kinds of information about the car, the follow-up question might be, why do you want this car? What's your intended use? And then based on that, you tailor the responses. And in fact, what they said was, this is what their actual humans do, right? The humans that are answering phone calls are kind of doing the same thing, at least the best humans in this role. And so now they're trying to get AI to do it. And, it's having an impact.
And to that point, the thing that I think that came across as kind of the fundamental reason why they were successful and continue to be is they did decompose it down into what are the steps, what are the things that happen, as opposed to, okay, AI, go talk to this person and solve their problem, right? And that I think we can overlay even on software development, on testing, on anything. And that is what we're learning, at least with the modern AI, is decomposition of a large problem into small problems tends to lead to a higher probability of success than if you try to give it a very large problem, which would allow it to wander or lose context, et cetera, as it tries to solve something very layered.
Guardrails are important, and
yes,
chunking out big problems into smaller ones naturally creates those guardrails, right?
Huge.
Yeah. There were a couple of really good choice quotes that came up in the section I just thought I'd share. One was this idea of LLMs are infinite content creation machines, which are incredibly unique and economically viable. So you just could create all kinds of stuff at scale, and you just couldn't do that before. So what implication does that have to how you think about structuring the customer experience? Because you could make it infinitely precise to the person you're interacting with, right? Which you just simply couldn't before. It wasn't possible.
Yeah, I think the sword swings the other way onto it as well, is that, more isn't always better. In very simple terms.
And isn't that the balance to strike? Somebody said, don't swap clicks for keystrokes, which I really like. Because, right, back in the day, it was, you really want to make this user interface, as few as X clicks. Otherwise, they will just abandon it and stop using it. And now it's like, well, there's 0 clicks, but there's like 50,000 keystrokes that you have to get through to get to the same place.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of a side conversation on that in terms of initial forays into the customer service stuff, leading to frustration on the part of the customers because they felt like nothing, for lack of better terms, they're talking to a robot and they knew it, and it wasn't being as efficient as engaging with a human.
Yeah, and actually, I think they were saying that, you really have to be careful about what metrics you're looking at to figure out whether you're successful or not. Like if you have, a large closure rate, but if you start reading the chat, it just becomes very clear very quickly that users just getting frustrated and just Xing out of it because they just cannot get AI to do anything. And this is back to guardrails are important. Getting AI to behave as your best, smartest humans is really important. And that's not a simple thing to do. It's not trivial, but it's well worth the effort.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And so on that note, moving on to the next topic, this was another interesting thing, which is really around team collaboration and culture in the era of AI. Again, this was in the context of, this is a kind of a product management focused panel discussion and conversation. And the question there is always, well, how does product interact with engineering, and how does product interact with sales, and how does engineering interact with, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of parts of the team. And how is that changing in this new AI era?
Yeah, and the thing that really came across, at least what I picked up was happening, and a key element of the success of Carvana was the optimism. In other words, this is helping us. It may have some, two steps forward, one step back, but we're moving in the right direction. And if we remain optimistic about where this thing is going to go and how we can leverage these things, and being aware of the perspective of others that we're looking at this potentially from the other side of the spectrum, you're in a really great position to make some really fundamentally good changes.
Yeah. One thing that came up was, there are certain invariants in terms of what good teams look like, whether AI is involved or not, right? And so this idea of everyone should be able to be heard, everyone should be able to critique and comment on other people's work and ideas. Everybody should be able to participate and kind of meaningfully impact what's going on. That's not really changing in the world of AI. What is interesting and how it does impact things is somebody was saying that, like, with AI, you could do everybody's job poorly, which is great perspective. And it's true, right? Before AI, there was only so much you could do in other people's wheelhouses. If you're a dev and you don't know how to design, well, it's the end. With AI, you certainly can attempt to design something, so you could do a designer's job, but most likely poorly. And how do you manage those dynamics where everybody can do everybody else's jobs poorly?
Well, and along those lines, there was the comment that, taste and expertise remain invaluable, right? And you can have a machine that can automate painting, but if you don't know what you're going to paint, or you don't have an idea of scope, or you can't appreciate color palettes or things like that, it's just going to be a low effort, ugly painting when you're done. And the designers
or perhaps even technically proficient, but lacking in that something that makes it great, emotion or what have you, right? Which is more likely the case. It's not necessarily going to look ugly. It's just going to look robotic.
Yeah, a good example is historically, automated things have been great at painting houses, but terrible at painting portraits.
Yeah, right. But yeah, taste does matter, and it's actually, I think, the antidote to thinking you could do everybody's job, because although you can, taste makes a difference, and there's a reason designers are designers.
Absolutely, and there's a reason why you have people who focus on architecture, and there's a reason why you have people focus on UX and user experience, et cetera. And one of the key things that was also brought up there is that teams that are successful in high performance, they can try different ideas and come up with one, or select the one that makes the most sense. AI can do all of the ideas, but not all of them are the best one. And to your point earlier, that kind of stuff doesn't change. You can have conversations, you can go around, but the fact that you have automation or something that can make it go faster or simpler doesn't take away the need for being judicious about which path you follow.
And to that point, the other thing that's kind of the dynamic that AI complicates, I think, in team engagement and collaboration is, the old adage of laser focused beats paralyzation every time, right? If your team is focused on a specific thing, they could get a lot further than if you have a whole bunch of things sort of simmering and slowly inching along. And I think AI makes this harder to manage, because AI, because of what it can do for you, it sort of tempts you into trying to do a lot of stuff at the same time, instead of taking all your energy and all your focus on just a very small handful of problems. And that's something you actually have to much more aggressively manage in the world of AI, because the temptation is so strong.
Well, and I think an increasingly interesting area where we're going to see some of the nuance of this is product management comes up and says, hey, look, I've got a mock. It's working pretty well. I think we can build on this. And engineering has something on the back end they've been working on. And now it's time we got to start merging. Mm-hmm. Right? And just at a purely technical level, that's been challenging in the past. But now you have two very prolific potential sources of code that are now going to try and merge. And one of the things I've noticed with AI, it is not afraid to re-architect something if it feels that there's a better way to do it quickly, which can wreak a little bit of havoc in being able to bring the project together on a number of different levels, even if you have it completely segmented and made into services.
It's a great point. That's another thing to manage aggressively, because AI is involved. Because yes, if you don't, I mean, it's optimized for speed, but that's not necessarily the best thing every time. So just as far as kind of the bottom line to this conversation or in terms of team collaboration, again, I think the theme is the same. A lot of things haven't really changed about what makes teams successful. It's the stuff that's always been true. AI has exacerbated certain issues, has made certain things easier to do, but at the end of the day, focus, engagement, collaborative and honest culture, that's the thing that drives the bus. AI doesn't really change that.
Absolutely.
The thing that AI does change is probably the last topic, which is inevitable at this point. Every conversation I'm in has this come up: code generation. How do we get AI to make code better, to make more code? And even in a product management focused panel discussion, this of course came up, and lots of people had lots of thoughts and opinions. I mean, where do you even start here, right? So, of course, a lot of people are using AI, agentic AI. It seems like it's very quickly becoming the norm. You know, even 6 months ago, I feel like if you go to any random conversation of a bunch of technology executives, show of hands, how many are actively using agentic development, you'd see a decent number of hands shoot up, but it's not overwhelming. Now I feel like we're really at a point where it's surprising when some hands don't go up. People start looking at them sideways because everybody's like, this is now the thing to do.
Yeah, well, as a complete side note, I would love to have one of those voting sessions come down to have someone stand up and define what agentic is, and have the hands raised to agree.
True. But I mean, you know, within reason, everyone's using some flavor of Claude, Copilot, Gemini.
Yes.
Because it's in the tools. It's everywhere you look, right? It's in the ether now. And so how do you use those tools more effectively? And one thing that came up, and this is becoming kind of a pattern, I feel, you know, get AI to ask clarifying questions before you start doing stuff. Somebody was saying that one technique that they're using, especially to get a handle on like kind of legacy code bases, is getting AI to ask developers who understand those code bases questions about the code base, the whys behind some of the code decisions that are embedded into that code base, and using those answers as a supplement to the context about the code base that the AI can then use to actually do something with it.
Yeah, and I think in addition to the value of kind of formulating the overall architecture up front logically, one of the things that I've seen get more traction out there in social media is the conversations about when it comes time to come back and fix things or to work on, you know, extensions, refactoring, etc. If you don't have a really well documented set of logic for how the system was originally built, you find yourself in a bit of a loop, having to go through and redevelop all of that context in a way that the AI can understand so it can add value once again. Sure, they can go through and read the code quickly and say, oh, I think I know what's going on. But there are always layers to that. And I think that this level of documentation requirements is really going to continue to rise.
I feel like just even broadly, there's a lot of energy going into, and I'm not surprised at all by this, into helping the AI agent get better context. Because
yes.
Right, like if you just step back, all these things people are doing, all these little tools and techniques people are using, almost all of them kind of boil down to this thing needs to get smarter about what it's doing, and in order for that to happen, it needs better context about what it's doing. And so whether I am writing documentation or asking or interrogating developers about stuff and writing that down, or asking it to generate a dependency graph of the code base and use that as input, or whatever, or, you know, go through GitHub commits for the last 10 years and, you know, pull up all the whys and kind of make them into some sort of a narrative that it can use. All of these things are ultimately trying to get this thing to be smarter about the code base that it's in, so and get better context.
Absolutely. And I believe things like, you know, oh, we've got a million token context, et cetera. That's great. It's nice for being able to handle a big piece of data. But on the development side, you're going to burn through that context at some point. It could take
Yeah.
an hour, it could take a day, it could take a week. But when you do and you come out on the other side, you don't want to be talking to a newborn and spending the next 3.5, 4 hours trying to say, no, we didn't do that. Yes, you did that. And in my experience, Claude.md is not nearly enough to get the thing back to where you were.
Yeah. I mean, just on a side note, Claude Code 2.0 that recently came out, you can now trigger the compacting of the context that it does automatically by not only triggering it with a command, but also giving it like a string to associate with that compacting. So you have the ability to actually yourself summarize, this is the last 3 hours of conversation that we just had. This is the most important thing about that. Put that in your memory so that when you come back to me in a minute after you compact it, you're on clean slate.
Taking it one step further, because I'm that kind of person, I have a directory in my current project called Claude Diary. And it has files. What are we working on? What have we worked on? What are our lessons learned? What are our major goals, etc. And I make sure before the compact begins that the diary is updated. And as soon as it comes back, I say, go through the diary directory. I want you to learn where we've been, where we are, what we want to do, and what we're trying to achieve. And I have found that to be a huge help.
Man, I love that idea. I mean, I've heard sort of variations of this from a bunch of people, but I feel like having kind of a structure like that really helps. The other thing I wish it and again, we're going on a complete tangent here, but I wish
it's fun.
but I wish this was kind of naturally embedded in the tool, right?
Yes.
Because you have to remember to say, please go through the diary because you just respawned with a new memory.
Yes.
Instead of it just saying, let me just go through this diary, as long as you put it in the common place. Yeah, I think this will get there, by the way. I think these learnings are going to get integrated into the tooling in just a matter of time.
Yeah. And I'm sure that they're paying attention to the little things we do like that at somewhere.
Well, that, and also, I mean, specifically to Claude, but I'm sure they all do it. Like everybody and their brother at Anthropic uses it for everything they do. Yeah. And you can only imagine, I don't know how many people work there, but the thousands that use it daily probably have tons of things that they're asking for because they just keep doing the same things over and over again, right? So yeah, you've got to believe, given the usage and the ubiquity of this, it's just going to get smarter and smarter about these kinds of things.
Yeah, but to your point, and smarter doesn't mean the model itself necessarily. It means the ability to maintain the context and have continuity. Because I think continuity is the number one thing across any model for coding.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I am sure there are material differences in base model capabilities when it comes to coding, but I'm also sure that those are not permanent and it changes all the time. And every time a new version comes out, it ekes out by a percentage or two on some coding test thing. So to me, that's sort of commodity stuff, or it will be. The thing that differentiates different tool sets and different approaches is exactly this. What are the tricks? What are the techniques to helping manage context and continuity? I completely agree. Well, I think that covers it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a informational meeting. I thought it was good. It was interesting to kind of start with that rather antagonistic study. I think the speakers did a great job of putting it in its place, and there were some good questions that came about that in my mind at least opened my eyes to where we are in terms of this new engineering PM-like entity thing is happening out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a wide-ranging conversation, so it was great. Well, if you found topics covered in this episode relevant, the LA CTO Forum has lots of opportunities to engage with other CTOs about topics just like this one. If you're interested in learning more, find us on LinkedIn or on the web at lactoforum.org. Until next time, may your deployments be smooth and your tech debt manageable.
And remember, if you can't handle the exception, at least log it properly. We'll catch you next time.